to enter the arena to answer the call. He decided to run for president, anchored by our Constitution, which everyone here knows begins with three simple, powerful words: we the people. We are better as a result of the new life and energy his hands have brought to our movement. And now he has come here to CPAC to speak directly with us, grassroots activists, grassroots conservatives, about how he will continue to be a part of our movement. He understands the challenges we face just keep adding up, and the solutions can't be found in Washington. Because he believes the true catalyst to improving America is found with us. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for a strong CPAC welcome for Dr. Ben Carson.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I am absolutely delighted to be here. My wife and my sons and their daughter and their wives are there. And thank you. Well, I want to thank you. I want to thank all the people who have worked so incredibly hard on my campaign. The volunteers, one young man, Braden Joplin, who even lost his life for something that they believed in with such fervor. And, it's an experience that I will never forget. Interestingly enough, a lot of people said to me, in order to really make it in this cycle, you have to be loud and boisterous, and you have to be willing to attack people. And, interestingly enough, I used to be like that. There was a time when I was, particularly in junior high school and in high school, I could come up with some stuff that would really embarrass people. And the people who are running today, boy, I could come up with some stuff, let me tell you. But you know what? I left that stuff in high school. It's... the things that affect us now are so incredibly important. And... one of the things that's going on in our nation, I've noticed as I've traveled around, wonderful Americans every place, every part of our country, but so many of them are angry and are afraid. And the problem when you're angry and afraid is that you tend to make bad decisions when you're angry and you're afraid. And what we have to do now is just sort of calm down and use the amazing intellect that God has given us. The human brain, billions and billions of neurons, hundreds of billions of interconnections. It remembers everything you've ever seen, everything you've ever heard. It can process more than 2 million bits of information in 1 second. There's a reason he gave us something like that, so that we can extract information from the past and the present and process it and project it into the future and think rationally and logically instead of just reacting. You don't need to have much of a developed brain to simply react, to react in fear. Animals can do that. Lizards can do that. We are human beings. So we must really start to think about, right now in America, what we need is leadership. And many people have said, who are you going to endorse? Well, let me tell you exactly the criteria that one should use when utilizing that brain. If we're talking about somebody who's going to lead America and the world, you need somebody who has demonstrated significant accomplishment in their life. Number one. You also need somebody whose ideas and policies are clear and easy to find so that with your intellect you can evaluate them. You need to look at how they treat others and how they treat their family, because that's how they're going to treat the American people. We need to see what have they done for America. Someone who wants to lead this nation should, in fact, have demonstrated in their life that they are trying to improve life for people in America. And we should also look at the people that they work with. Who are those people? What do those people have to say? And how have they been able to collaborate with other people to get things done? All of those are very important factors. And somebody who can check the box on all of those is going to make an incredible leader. Also, somebody who's ethical. Because what we need in America right now is trickle-down ethics. It's very important that we get that. And conservatives should not be ashamed of capitalism. We've had those who've tried to make it sound like a bad word. It's not a bad word. It had produced the highest standard of living that anybody has ever known. But what we must do as conservatives is to make sure that we couple capitalism with compassion. And that will be a winning formula for us. Recognize that in this country we have 330 million people. And it sounds like a lot of people, but compare that with China, 1.4 billion. India, 1.1 billion. It means we need to develop all of our people. We can't afford to have 20+% of our people not graduating from high school in the technological age. We cannot afford to have 5% of the world's population and 25% of the inmates. And we need to look at a government that has policies that destroys families rather than pulling families together, because you need that family unit in order to strengthen America. You know, our pillars of strength, our faith and our family. And as those things are being eroded, you see what is happening to our nation. We, the people, have to be the ones who really push these things. The government is not pushing it. The government, they don't understand what compassion is. They think patting somebody on the head and saying, there, you poor little thing, I'm going to take care of all your needs, is compassion. That is just the opposite of compassion. That is making people dependent on the system. That is the worst thing you can do to anybody. So what we must concentrate on is the path, the bridge that allows people to move out of a state of dependency and become part of the strength and fabric of this country. That's how we become strong as a nation. The fewer people we have to pull along, and the more people who become part of the productive side of America, the better life will be for everybody. And that's what we have to keep in mind. We also must recognize that we, the American people, are not each other's enemies. You know, it's, I think, a nefarious group of individuals who are making every attempt to divide us as Americans. And what we must begin to really concentrate on is having conversations with each other and talking through our differences and finding resolution. Again, a reason that we have these amazing brains. And if we're fighting each other all the time, then it makes it excessively easy for those who really are our enemies, the radical Islamic terrorists who want to destroy us. We need to understand that. And why would we make their job easier for them by trying to destroy ourselves? And we need to identify those people in our society who are always trying to splinter us too, because believe me, they are not our friends either. We also need to be thinking about our future generations. And this is an area that has concerned me immensely. Thomas Jefferson said it's immoral to borrow from the next generation. Think about that. Here we are in a situation where $19 trillion, and it's going to be $20 trillion next year. Think about the impact of that. The Fed has to suppress the interest rates. They don't necessarily want income to rise either, because we're in such a difficult economic situation. But think what happens to the American dream when Joe the butcher cannot go every Friday like he used to the bank and put 5 to 10% of his check in a savings account and watch it grow over the next few decades, because there is no growth. There is no incentive to do that. Same thing with the bond market. So only place money can be made is in the stock market. Well, who can invest in the stock market? Well-to-do people. And hence, what happens? The income gap grows. So along comes Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton talking about this income gap, and they say it's the evil rich people. It is not the evil rich people. It's the evil government that keeps driving our debts up to these levels. That's what's causing the problem. And we must be able to identify where the true culprits lie. The government keeps growing because it feels that it's the one who can solve our problems. That's a mistake. You know, it started sort of like in the 20s with the Wilson administration, kept multiplying. By the time we got to the Johnson administration, you know, you're talking, we, the government, are going to eliminate poverty. Remember that? The war on poverty. How'd that work out? You know, $19 trillion later, we have 10 times more people on food stamps, more welfare, poverty, broken homes out of wedlock birth, crime, incarceration. Everything is not only worse, it's much worse. And that's what happens when the government starts doing things that it's not supposed to do. They need to read the Constitution. That is not their job. Taking care of the indigent, that is our job. That is our job. And maybe the government did read it. Maybe they read the Constitution. They got confused when they read the preamble. I'm hopeful that maybe some people, now that I am leaving the campaign trail, I know there's I know there's a lot. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. But even though I might be leaving the campaign, you know, there's a lot of people who love me. They just won't vote for me, but it's okay. It's not a problem. You know, I will still continue to be heavily involved, you know, in trying to save our nation. We have to save it. And I'll be involved in a lot of different things, including My Faith Votes, which is an organization that is going to try to help the faith community to recognize how important their vote is. Because in 2012, 25 million evangelicals did not vote. The margin of difference was only 5 million. So it gives you some idea how important that is. But we have to get these people registered, and we have to get them to understand that they have to play a role. Because a lot of people in the faith community, they say, God's got it under control, so I just don't really need to do anything. Well, one of the ways that God controls it is through us. So we have to do stuff. You know? And, just brings me to the whole topic of our faith as a nation. We're in the process of allowing the secular progressives to drive faith out of our country. And you look at, one of their heroes, Saul Alinsky, who was also a hero of Hillary Clinton. And he was a community organizer like Barack Obama. And he wrote a famous book, as you know, called Rules for Radicals. Now, to just give you some idea of who these people are, on the dedication page, it says this book is dedicated to Lucifer, the original radical who gained his own kingdom. So when we're talking about throwing God out and then substituting something that is radically different, you can imagine what the effects of that are going to be on our nation. We're the only ones who can change that. And I know that President Obama said we're not a Judeo-Christian nation. But he doesn't get to decide. We get to decide what kind of nation we are. And it is so important. It is so important that the people with common sense, that includes, conservative people, it includes even some Democrats. There are some. But it includes the people who understand that right now, this is a most important election because we are deciding, do we want to allow the government to dictate our rights? In exchange, they take care of all of our necessities. Or do we want to have a nation where individuals have choice and where we take the responsibility for our needs in an atmosphere of equality of opportunity? Because isn't that what it's about? Not equality of everything except for opportunity. We give opportunity to everybody in America. And the bottom line is, we the people, we are the ones who will be making the decisions. But in order to do that, we must become active. We must become informed. We cannot continue to allow ourselves to be influenced and molded by the political class and by the media. That is going to destroy us. And it's kind of sad. It's kind of sad because the press is the only business that is specifically protected by our Constitution. And the reason is because they were supposed to be the allies of the people. They were not supposed to take sides and do what they have done. And I use this as an opportunity to appeal to the press and particularly to the younger members of the press, not to allow yourselves to be captured by those who are attempting to impose an agenda upon America. Remember that you too are a part of us. And if the whole country goes over the cliff, you're going over with it. So join us in being fair to everybody and open once again in America. So, I just want to close by saying, right now, it is so important that every one of us use all the talent that we have, everything that we have. This is not about any individual person. This is about us collectively as a nation. And I guarantee you that Candy and I and our whole family love this nation. And could I sit down right now and enjoy the rest of my life in complete luxury? Absolutely. But I can't do that knowing that the next generation is in trouble, and we will do everything we can to preserve the greatness of America. Thank you. And now, please welcome Fox News contributor Mercedes Schlapp for the Q&A.
Hello, everyone. Dr. Carson.
How are you?
Wonderful to be here.
Okay.
So I get a text from my 12-year-old daughter who says, Mom, Carson just dropped out of the race. You need to change some of the questions, so we're going to get rid of these. But I've got a backup, okay? But it's really an honor to be here with you, sir.
Thank you.
And we'll start with, I heard in your campaign a lot of times that they would say, God opens a door. And sometimes, and you choose to go through it and follow through. And now God seems to have opened a different door for you.
Yes. There was no question that he had to open the doors because, being a person with no political ties whatsoever, no PACs, nothing, the pundits were probably right. They said, there's no way you can run a national campaign for president. It can't happen. It's never happened, and it's not going to happen now. And I just said, Lord, you heard what they said. If you want me to do this, you have to open a door. If you open the door, I'll walk through it. And he opened the door, so I walked through it. It was as simple as that. And, God has a much greater perspective than we do and a much different timeline than we do. And he knows exactly what he's doing. So all we do is we follow his will. We continue to be truthful. We do everything that is right, and he will take care of the rest.
So, Dr. Carson, you've spent so much energy and time on the campaign trail. How do you see when that moment where you and Candy and the kids decided we need to suspend this campaign?
Well, I have always kind of thought that people at some point would just say, enough of this foolishness. We're going to look at these policies and we're going to see what works. We haven't gotten there quite yet, but we're gradually moving in that direction. So, I did the math. I looked at the delegate counts. I looked at the states. I looked at the requirements, and I realized that it simply wasn't going to happen. And if that's the case, then I didn't want to interfere with the process.
So, now last night there was this event, I think it was called a debate. There was thousands of people in this room. Were you watching Netflix or were you watching the debate?
You would have thought it was Netflix. I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's very sad that we've reached that point. the last debate before, when I went out into the spin room, the most common question I got from the international press was, "Aren't you embarrassed?" And, part of that I blame the media for, because they're trying to stir up a fight, but they're not really interested in the answers. They're not interested in the solutions. They're interested in ratings. But also, I continue to ask my friends who are running for president, and I've talked with all of them this week, to rise above the level of the press and just to say, we're going to talk about the real solutions here. And they can question each other, because it is important to know where people stand on these issues. And you can't just answer a question by saying, "Oh yeah, it's going to be okay." Yeah, you have to actually answer the question. And I think both the moderators and the other candidates should insist on answers from everybody, because we, the people, deserve to know who we're choosing for president.
Okay, trick question here. Brokered convention, good thing or bad thing?
I would prefer, in general, not to have one, but there's a reason that the process is in place. The only thing that I would really have a problem with is if somebody starts changing the rules. Leave the rules as they are and play by the rules, and I think we'll be okay.
You have hundreds of thousands of supporters. Where do you tell your Carson supporters to go? You talked about the criteria of the next presidential candidate. Where do they go?
Well, actually, we have millions of supporters. And it has been rather astonishing hearing from them and seeing how enthusiastic they are. And, they're still saying, whatever you want to do, we're going to support you. But I have heard a lot of troubling things, like people saying, if you're not going to be on the ticket, I'm not going to vote. That's not a good thing, because what we have to recognize is that when you don't vote, you are voting. But you're voting for the other side. And we can't afford that, because if we get in there, someone like Hillary Clinton, who loves Saul Alinsky and who loves Margaret Sanger, she's going to get 2 to 4 Supreme Court picks. Now, that's going to, I think, ruin the future for our children, our grandchildren, all of our progeny. I think that's just as bad as taking a knife and stabbing them with it. Think about that. So let's not do that. Let's make sure that we act responsibly, exercise our civic duty, and please, no matter how you feel, recognize that if we choose another secular progressive, we have done our children in, and we can't afford to do that.
Dr. Carson, what issue do you think the presidential candidates are not addressing on the Republican side?
I think the thing that they're not addressing is the fiscal gap. Have you noticed that no one talks about the fiscal gap? No Washington politician will talk about the fiscal gap. But I'm not a politician, so I can talk about it. Because, what it is the unfunded liabilities, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, all the governmental programs going forward, versus the money that we have coming back in through taxes and other revenue sources. And other revenue sources should be a huge amount of money, because this country owns over $150 trillion in assets. Now, you give $150 trillion in assets to a well-run business, and we would not have a national debt. We would wipe that out easily just from the return on that each year. And, I obviously became very familiar with the corporate world, spending 18 years on the board of Kellogg and 16 years on the board of Costco, and seeing how to actually run something efficiently. If our government was a business, it would be out of business in a week. I mean, that's how bad it is. But at any rate, the amount of money that we have coming back and the amount that we owe should be about equal if we were fiscally responsible. If we're not, a gap forms. Bring that forward to today's dollars. That's called the fiscal gap, and it sits at over $200 trillion. So if somebody miraculously came along and said, United States of America, for your birthday, I'm paying off your national debt, and wrote us a check for $19 trillion, many people would be dancing in the streets. We wouldn't even be close to being out of trouble. That is what no one will tell you. And we need to know that kind of information so that when people come along and say, free college for everybody, we know how to react to that. That's just going to drive us off the fiscal cliff much faster than we were going off before.
Okay, so one word that describes Bet Carson. Okay, two. Make it two. Come on.
Okay, two. That makes it easy. I would say...
They're answering for you.
I would say the children. Because that's what this is all about. It's about the children. It's about their future. And, my whole career was about giving children a second chance. And, it's been so wonderful on the campaign trail because I operated on 15,000 people. I get to see them all over the place. And it's just wonderful. I remember I was in Kentucky last year, and there was a young man there and his family. They came up, they said, do you remember me? And I said, you look familiar, because I say that to everybody. And they said, you operated on him when he was 1 year old. And you did a hemispherectomy. That's an operation where we take out half the brain to stop intractable seizures. And they said he just graduated from college,
wow.
#1 in his class.
Wow.
And then there was a beautiful, statuesque young woman who came up to my wife, and she said, are you the wife of Dr. Ben Carson? And she said, yes. She said, he operated on me when I was still in my mother's womb. And now she's grown up, a beautiful young lady who's self-supporting. So anybody who tells me that something inside of the uterus is just a useless bunch of cells has no idea what they're talking about.
My last question. You have brought such civility, this tone of civility to this race. What advice do you give to these other candidates that are left, who are left?
I would tell them that they must understand that we, the Republicans, are not each other's enemies. And we cannot afford to give the Democrats all of this ammunition. I wish that people will remember what happened last time and how the Republicans were destroying each other. And, President Obama did not have a good record to run on, and that's putting it mildly. But they were able to use so much of the material that we used against each other that he was able to win. You know, that's going to happen again this time. We've already supplied them with an enormous amount of material. Could we just stop? And the way to ferret this thing out is not by calling each other names, but really by challenging each other's positions and having them explain why they believe what they do. That will sort out all the things that need to be sorted out without us injuring the brand. The Republican brand is really, I think, grossly mischaracterized. And we add to some of that ourselves. And we've got to be much smarter. It's one of the things that I will be continuing to work with the party, particularly to bring in a wider variety of people and to